Greetings, cozy knights. Lower your swords and rest by the fire. Tonight, we journey through more hidden magic facts buried deep in the world of Skyrim. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from tonight and what games you want me to cover next. And subscribe if this helps you sleep. The Necromage Vampire Exploit. There is a hidden interaction buried so deep in Skyrim's code that it eluded most players for months after the game launched. The restoration perk, Necromage, found at level 70 in the skill tree, states simply that spells are more effective against undead. Simple enough. But here is where it gets extraordinary. If you become a vampire after taking the Necromage perk, your character is flagged by the game as undead. And because the perk's effect is written broadly, it now applies to you, boosting your own enchantments by 25%, your flesh spell durations by 50%, and even the magnitude of certain standing stone effects. Enchantments placed on armor after acquiring Necromage, while in a vampiric state, become significantly more potent. The Atronach perk's spell absorption rises from 30% to 37.5%. If this combination is pursued deliberately, it creates one of the most powerful character builds in the entire game, not through glitches or console commands, but through a genuine, hidden interaction buried within the system. Bethesda never patched it. The Dragonren shout's unique origin. Of all 20 shouts in Skyrim's base game, Dragonren stands alone in one profound and often overlooked way. Every other shout was created by dragons or taught by Parthenaks and the ancient Greybeards, beings who had centuries of meditation behind their mastery of the Thu'um. But Dragonren was created entirely by mortals. The three ancient Nord heroes, Feldir the Old, Gormla Golden Hilt, and Håkon One-Eye. They forged it specifically to combat Alduin during the Dragon War, embedding within its words the very concept of mortality. Dragons, by nature, cannot comprehend mortality. They are eternal. By shouting Dragonrend at a dragon, you force upon it the incomprehensible knowledge of what it means to be finite and temporary, causing it to crash to the ground in conceptual agony. This is why it cannot be found on any word wall scattered through Skyrim's ruins, and cannot be learned through the normal process of exploring and discovering. Instead, the shout is absorbed at the time wound on the throat of the world, a unique tear in history left by the Elder Scroll used to send Alduin through time, witnessed only by living through that ancient moment. It exists outside the natural order of the Thu'um, a weapon of pure mortal ingenuity built from pain and desperation, making it arguably the most philosophically powerful shout in the game. The Quiet Casting perk reveals a design secret. The illusion perk Quiet Casting sits in the middle of its skill tree with a description that reads simply, "All spells you cast from any school of magic make no sound." Most players assume this means illusion spells only. After all, it is an illusion perk, and the school deals with perception and subtlety, but the description is entirely literal. All spells, from any school, the crackling electricity of a chain lightning, the roaring gust of a fireball, the grinding conjuration sound of a frost atronach, all of it silenced. For stealth mages, this transforms the perk from merely useful to completely essential. You can stand in the shadows of a dungeon, hurl a fireball into a cluster of bandits, and never break your sneak state due to sound alone. Only the impact of the spell might alert survivors. This quiet design detail suggests Bethesda originally intended illusion to serve as the foundation of an arcane stealth build, funneling other schools of magic through its lens of silence and manipulation. It is one of the most elegantly designed cross-school interactions in the game, and the majority of players who take the perk never realize its true scope. Illusion spell level, caps, and the dual cast difference. The Illusion School benefits from dual casting in a way that differs dramatically from every other school. When you dual cast a destruction spell, you deal roughly 10% more damage for 40% more magicka, a poor trade in almost all circumstances. But when you dual cast an illusion spell like Fury or Calm, the maximum level of creature that can be affected increases substantially. This is because illusion spells in Skyrim scale based on a hidden level cap. The spell can only affect creatures below a certain level threshold. Dual casting shifts that threshold upward, allowing you to affect more powerful enemies than a single hand cast would ever reach. Combined with perks like Kindred Mage, which adds 10 levels to the cap for humanoids, and Animage, which does the same for animals, a master illusion mage who dual casts with a full perk investment can affect even high-level Draga, dragons, and powerful humanoid enemies with mind-altering spells. This stacking of modifiers is never explained in any tooltip and requires players to research the hidden mechanics themselves to fully understand. The spell absorption ceiling. Skyrim has a hidden system that governs how much spell damage can be negated, and it is a number most players never think to seek. The game caps total magic resistance at 85%, meaning that even with every piece of resist magic gear stacked, you cannot become completely immune to magical damage through resistance alone. But spell absorption, a different mechanic, plays by different rules. Spell absorption does not reduce damage from spells that hit you. Instead, it gives a percentage chance that an incoming spell is absorbed entirely, converting its magicka into your own reserves, rather than dealing any damage. The Atronach Stone provides 50% absorption, and the Atronach perk in the Alteration Tree adds 30%. A Breton can also trigger the Dragon Skin power for 50% absorption once per day. Layering these with the Necromage Vampire interaction can push absorption to 100%, a permanent state of complete magical immunity. At that point, enemy mages refill your magicka pool every time they cast at you. What was designed as a defensive mechanic becomes a form of arcane vampirism. Dead Thrall's infinite potential. Of all the spells in the Conjuration School, Dead Thrall sits at the summit in terms of raw utility, and most players who cast it never explore how deeply they can exploit its mechanics. Dead Thrall reanimates a humanoid corpse indefinitely. Unlike lesser reanimate spells, the Thrall does not decay into ash after a time limit. When your Thrall is killed, you simply cast the spell again. But here is the layer most players miss. Dead Thralls can be used as permanent pack mules. You can store items in a Thrall's corpse by accessing their inventory, then kill or dismiss them and retrieve the items later. Thralls retain the gear they were wearing when alive, meaning that if you thrall a powerful enemy, a vampire Nightmaster for example, or a high-level Draga, they fight with that enemy's full equipment indefinitely. With the Twin Souls perk, you can maintain 2 dead thralls simultaneously, and with the Necromage perk applied while vampiric, the level cap for who can be thralled increases beyond its normal ceiling. This creates situations where two of the most powerful enemies in the game follow you as obedient servants, wearing their original armor and wielding their original weapons until you choose to release them. Spell absorption converts, Staves 2. The spell absorption mechanic in Skyrim is well known for absorbing incoming spells cast by enemy mages. What is far less known is that it extends beyond spells cast by living creatures. If an enemy uses a staff against you, the energy released by that staff can also be absorbed, filling your magicka reserves as if the staff's magic were a spell you had caught. Staves do not require magicka to fire, which means absorbing a staff's attack effectively gives you free magicka from an enemy's own equipment. The absorption also interacts with animal attacks. Certain animal-borne disease chances are classified as magical effects within Skyrim's code, meaning a character with high spell absorption can even absorb the disease chance from a wolf's bite, gaining a small amount of magicka in the process. This bizarre edge case reveals how broadly the game applies its magical framework. Nearly everything that is not purely physical damage carries some magical classification, even if the visual presentation suggests otherwise. Vision of the 10th Eye. A one-time window. When the illusion master Drevis Nellerin at the College of Winterhold sends you to find 4 hidden master illusion texts, he gives you a spell unlike any other in the game, Vision of the 10th Eye. When cast, the world takes on a pale blue tint and certain invisible objects, specifically the 4 hidden texts, become briefly visible, glowing with a faint red aura. The spell lasts only 30 seconds. This creates a quiet pressure, a gentle urgency against the otherwise unhurried pace of magical study. What makes this spell philosophically interesting is its name. The concept of a 10th eye suggests a form of perception beyond normal sight, a magical sense that reveals hidden truths to the trained mind. Drevis himself is an illusion master whose defining trait is that other people cannot always see him. He is occasionally encountered wandering the college, partially invisible by accident, startled to find someone can hear him when he was certain he was hidden. A teacher of hidden sight, who sometimes loses control of his own invisibility, is either an elegant character detail or a quiet warning about what happens when you spend too long inside the School of Deception. The Equilibrium Sacrifice. Hidden in Labyrinthian, accessible during the college questline, lies a spell tome for one of Skyrim's most unusual spells, Equilibrium. Equilibrium is an alteration spell that does something no other spell in the game does. It drains your health to refill your magicka at a 1-to-1 conversion rate. This means that every point of health you sacrifice becomes a point of magicka replenished. The spell has no cooldown and can be cast indefinitely. The obvious risk is that you can kill yourself this way, but the less obvious dimension is the synergy it creates. Cast Equilibrium to drain your health, then cast healing spells using the magicka you just gained. And because healing spells refill health, you can sit in a corner cycling between the two indefinitely, rapidly leveling both alteration and restoration simultaneously while consuming no resources beyond the time it takes. The spell was intended to represent a high-risk trade-off, but creative players turned it into a passive leveling engine. Labyrinthian offers it quietly, with no fanfare, buried in one of Skyrim's most atmospheric ruins, the place where the previous Archmage met his end. The Soul Cairn's forgotten prisoners. In the Dawnguard DLC, the Soul Cairn is described in lore as the realm where souls captured in soul gems are sent. Not the entire soul, but the vital energy of the individual, siphoned away and imprisoned forever in a half-existence between life and death. The souls wandering the grey, crumbling landscape of the Soul Cairn are not travellers or explorers. They are victims of soul trapping, beings who are caught in gems and sent to serve the ideal masters, enigmatic entities of pure, concentrated soul energy who rule the realm. Among them are ancient beings who have been there long enough to forget their names, their races, and the worlds they came from. Some remember only fragments. One soul recounts being a scholar. Another claims to have once been a warrior. Their dialogue is minimal, but if you engage them, it paints a picture of identity slowly dissolving under the weight of centuries. Every filled soul gem you use to recharge an enchanted weapon or craft an enchantment represents a being in the Soul Cairn, fulfilling an eternal obligation they never agreed to. Bound weapons are secretly Daedric. When you cast a conjuration spell to summon a bound sword, bound battle axe, or any other bound weapon, the blade that materializes in your hand looks ethereal and blue-white, glowing with conjured energy. What the game does not tell you is that these weapons are, in terms of their base statistics, equivalent to Daedric weapons, the most powerful material-based weapons in the game. A bound sword shares damage values with a Daedric sword. The key differences are that bound weapons cannot be tempered at a grindstone, and they disappear after a set duration, but they carry a bonus that Daedric weapons cannot. The Mystic Binding perk adds a soul trap effect to all bound weapons, meaning every kill with a bound blade automatically fills a soul gem without requiring a separate soul trap spell. At the apprentice level of conjuration, a character can effectively wield what amounts to a Daedric sword with a built-in soul trap for essentially zero cost, long before they would normally encounter Daedric materials in the world. Destruction damage does not scale with skill. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive fact about Skyrim's magic system, and one that has frustrated mages for over a decade. As your destruction skill increases from 15 to 100, the base damage of your spells does not increase at all. A flame spell deals 8 damage per second at skill 15 and 8 damage per second at skill 100. The only way to increase spell damage is through the specific perk investments: Augmented Flames, Augmented Frost, and Augmented Shock, each of which adds a 25% damage multiplier per rank. This design choice means that a destruction mage without the right perks is functionally identical in offensive power to a novice who just picked up their first spell tome. It also means that the destruction skill functions primarily as a cost reduction mechanism rather than a power enhancement one. Warriors who switch from swords to spells often notice their offensive output feels flat by comparison, not realizing that without careful perk planning, their skill level is contributing nothing to their damage. The Ancestor Moth Priests and Elder Scrolls Eating. Within the lore surrounding the Dawnguard DLC, a small and haunting order of men called the Moth Priests dedicate their lives to the dangerous act of reading Elder Scrolls, impossibly complex artifacts that contain fragments of future and past simultaneously. Reading an Elder Scroll without preparation causes blindness. Reading multiple scrolls accelerates the blindness dramatically. The Moth Priests know this and do it anyway. developing elaborate rituals involving the silk of ancestor moths, creatures that, lore suggests, have a unique relationship with prophetic knowledge. The moths are attracted to those who carry the resonance of scroll reading, and their silk, when woven and worn, briefly stabilizes the reader's vision. Eventually, every moth priest who reads enough scrolls goes blind. They describe it not as loss, but as transcendence, the cessation of ordinary sight making room for something they call the reading, a perception of information that exists beyond visual input. The blind priest Knight Paladin Gelibor in Dawnguard demonstrates this, perceiving the world with clarity despite sightless eyes. Mage Light's forgotten uses. Mage Light is often treated as a utility spell, a way to light up dark areas more stylishly than a torch. But the spell has mechanical properties that give it a secondary combat application that most players never explore. When cast at an enemy, Mage Light sticks to them and produces a persistent glow that follows them wherever they go. This has one critical combat implication. Enemies affected by Mage Light cannot become invisible. Any illusion spell that makes an enemy invisible is immediately countered and neutralized if Mage Light is already attached to them. For characters who fight vampires, who commonly use invisibility, or who encounter enemies with chameleon enchantments, Mage Light transforms from a torch substitute into a targeted countermeasure. It also alerts you to enemies who have fled into the shadows, making their position obvious even when you cannot hear their footsteps. A handful of enemies in the Dawnguard expansion use illusion spells aggressively, and bringing Mage Light into those encounters changes the dynamic entirely. Paarthurnax and the ethics of forgiveness. Near the summit of the throat of the world, the oldest living dragon in Skyrim meditates on a word wall, allowing frost and time to accumulate on his scales undisturbed. Paarthurnax was once the lieutenant of Alduin during the Dragon War, responsible for acts of destruction and domination that the game's lore describes only in the vaguest terms. Things Unforgivable is about as specific as the dialogue gets. He turned against Alduin and helped teach mortals the Thu'um, giving humanity the tools to resist dragon tyranny. He has spent thousands of years in solitary meditation atop the highest mountain in Tamriel, attempting to overcome what he calls the Dove nature, the deep dragon drive toward dominance and destruction. He freely admits the struggle. He admits that when you tell him of Alduin's return, something in him briefly felt glad, then immediately corrected himself. This one line of dialogue, easily missed if you click through quickly, tells you everything about Paarthurnax's character, that the victory over his own nature is ongoing, never finished, won each day through choice and discipline, rather than permanent transformation. The Ritual Stone's necromantic override. The Ritual Stone, found southeast of Whiterun along the Guardian Stone's road, grants a unique power when activated. Once per day, you can raise all nearby dead as temporary undead thralls. This power functions differently from Conjuration Reanimate spells in one significant way. It does not discriminate. Giants, mammoths, saber-cats, bandits, soldiers. Everything dead within range rises at once. The power works on creatures of any level, far beyond what the highest Conjuration Reanimate spells can normally affect. For a character with both the Ritual Stone and the Necromage perk, who is also a vampire, the level cap of what can be raised through this power extends even further. The result is the ability to stand in the center of a major battle's aftermath and watch every fallen combatant rise to serve you simultaneously. The visual of a field of mammoths and giants lurching upright is one of the more quietly surreal moments Skyrim can generate, all from a standing stone placed casually near a road where most players walk past without stopping. Illusion and the Dragonborn's unique advantage. There is a subtle mechanic built into illusion spells that many players miss, even after spending dozens of hours with the school. Illusion spells affect creatures and people up to a level cap determined by the spell's tier. A novice illusion spell might affect creatures up to level 5, an apprentice spell up to level 12, and so on. The Dragonborn can push these caps through perks: Kindred Mage for humanoids, Animage for animals, and Hypnotic Gaze, which adds an additional 10 levels to illusion's effectiveness for humanoid enemies. Combined with dual casting, a master illusion build can make even an elder dragon ignore you through Pacify, or send a Draugr Deathlord fleeing in hysteria from an expertly constructed combination of perks and the correct spell tier. This level scaling means that the investment required to make illusion truly dominant is substantial, but the reward is the ability to walk through almost any scenario, fort, dungeon, city, dragon lair, without a single fight, by simply convincing every living being in the area that you are not a threat, or that their companions are enemies. The Ethereum Forge's ancient magic. In the Dawn Guard, DLC's Forgotten Vale and associated questline, the Lost Dwemer Ethereum Forge can be accessed at the end of Lost to the Ages. The forge is powered by a deposit of Ethereum, a crystalline material that the Dwemer coveted above almost anything else, going to war with each other over its deposits. Ethereum is magical in a way that differs from conventional enchanting. It does not draw power from souls or magicka, but from an ambient arcane resonance present in the material itself. Items crafted from Ethereum at the forge do not function like normal enchanted items. They produce effects that cannot be replicated by any combination of standard enchanting. The Ethereum crown, for example, allows the wearer to use 2 standing stones simultaneously, normally impossible. The ethereal shield makes enemies ethereal on a bash, temporarily removing them from combat. The ethereal staff summons dwarven constructs rather than Daedra. These items represent a magical discipline that predates the College of Winterhold, predates the current enchanting system, and points toward a form of Dwemer arcane craft that died with their civilization. Spriggan Earth Mother's healing aura. Most players encounter Spriggans as hostile woodland spirits and deal with them accordingly. But Spriggans possess a magical ability that has ecological implications beyond simple combat. Spriggan Earth Mothers, the larger, more powerful variant, constantly emit a healing aura that restores health to nearby animals. If you watch a Spriggan Earth Mother in a forest clearing, you will often see woodland animals congregating around her, drawn by the restorative energy she projects. The animals are not attacking the Spriggan. They are benefiting from her presence. This relationship suggests that Spriggans function as caretakers rather than mere guardians, maintaining the health and vitality of forest ecosystems through passive magical radiation. When you kill a Spriggan Earth Mother, you are not merely defeating an enemy, you are disrupting what is effectively a magical anchor point for local wildlife. Some players have noted that areas where Spriggan Earth mothers once appeared seem less populated with wildlife on subsequent visits, though whether this is intentional ecological design or coincidence is unclear. The Dawnbreaker's hidden purpose. The Daedric artifact Dawnbreaker, received as a reward from Meridia after cleansing her temple of the necromancer Malkaran, is commonly treated as a strong weapon with a useful fire enchantment and an undead explosion effect. But lore embedded in Meridia's dialogue and the surrounding quest context reveals a deeper layer. Meridia is the Daedric Prince of Life and is specifically opposed to undead, not as a combat enemy, but philosophically, as an affront to the principles she embodies. She has absolute contempt for necromancers and anything that subverts the natural passage of souls. Dawnbreaker does not merely damage undead. On killing blow, it generates a Meridia-imbued pulse that turns lesser undead against each other. This is not a random combat bonus. It reflects Meridia's fundamental belief that undead are corrupted beings whose souls are being denied their proper journey. The explosion is, in her cosmology, an act of liberation. The effect that turns undead against each other is Meridia using her artifact to free them from whoever bound them, even briefly, giving them one last moment of agency before the light takes them. Illusion's Master Spell Discovery Ritual. When you reach mastery in illusion and approach Drevis Neloran to learn the final secrets of the school, he does not simply hand you a tome. He gives you vision of the 10th eye and sends you to search the college itself for 4 texts that are invisible to anyone without this spell active. The texts are hidden in plain sight, on tables, on barrels, on stairs within the college, but completely imperceptible without Drevis's spell. This quest functions as a kind of final exam for illusion mastery, testing not your combat ability or your knowledge of spell mechanics, but your willingness to look again at places you thought you already understood and find what was hidden there. The spell you receive in return for completing this, Hysteria, causes targets to flee in absolute terror, regardless of their level. This is illusion's philosophical peak. The highest expression of the school is not charm or confusion or suggestion. It is pure, unqualified terror. The certainty that something is so wrong, so fundamentally threatening to survival, that flight is the only rational response. The Dragonborn's unique Thuum. Processing. What separates the Dragonborn from the Greybeards at a metaphysical level is not just power, but the mechanism by which Thuum knowledge is acquired. A normal mortal who learns a word of power must meditate upon it, sometimes for years, to truly internalize its meaning and integrate it into a shout. The Greybeards spent their entire adult lives this way. Paarthurnax has been meditating at the summit for thousands of years and still describes the process as ongoing. But the Dragonborn absorbs the meaning of words of power instantaneously upon approaching a word wall, and then can unlock that knowledge with a dragon soul in seconds. This is because a dragon soul does not merely provide fuel for the Thuum, it provides complete, pre-existing comprehension. When you absorb a dragon soul, you absorb the full context of the dragon language as that dragon understood it. You are not learning the word. You are inheriting it in all its implications directly from the being who embodied it for centuries. The Greybeards recognize this as something unprecedented, which is precisely why they call you to High Hrothgar, rather than sending instructions by courier. Whispering Door, and Ebony Mail's Muffle Effect. The Daedric artifact, Ebony Mail, received through Boethiah's questline, is one of the more unusual pieces of armor in the game. Its poison cloak effect, which damages nearby enemies continuously, gets most of the attention. What players rarely notice is its secondary enchantment. The Ebony Mail automatically applies a muffle effect identical to the illusion spell, silencing your footsteps completely and permanently for as long as you wear it. This effect is not listed prominently in the item description and is easy to overlook. For stealth characters who wear heavy armor, this is extraordinary. It resolves one of the central tensions of a stealth heavy armor build. Heavy armor normally generates footstep noise that makes sneaking fundamentally harder. The Ebony Mail eliminates that noise entirely, allowing you to be heavily armored and nearly silent simultaneously. The poisonous aura transforms the armor into something that punishes enemies for approaching, while the silence ensures that you can control whether they ever know you are near at all. The Dragon War's real cost. The Dragon War, that ancient conflict between mortal men and dragonkind that forms the deep historical backdrop of Skyrim's main quest, is described in lore as a catastrophic and prolonged struggle across what would become the continent of Tamriel. What the game does not emphasize prominently is how close humanity came to total defeat. Dragons are not simply powerful. In the early Merethic era, they were god kings, worshipped as divines, with an entire cult of human priests serving them willingly. The dragon cult built the massive stone towers and barrows still littering Skyrim's landscape, staffed by devoted followers who would become Draugr upon death, continuing to serve their masters even as animated corpses. The human uprising against dragons was not an organized military campaign, but a slow, brutal reversal of a religious order in which the oppressors were literally immortal. Even after Alduin was defeated and the Dragon War won, the dragons persisted across Tamriel for centuries. The word walls you find scattered through ruined Nordic tombs are not decorations. They are the survivors of a civilization that used language as its first and most powerful weapon, carved in stone so the knowledge would not die even if the people did. Flame Thrall's permanent summon mechanics. At the very pinnacle of Conjuration's summoning branch lie 3 master-level spells that fundamentally rewrite the rules of the school: Flame Thrall, Frost Thrall, and Storm Thrall. Every other summoning spell in the school is bound by duration, 60 or 120 seconds for most, occasionally extended by the Atromancy perk. The 3 Thrall spells have no duration limit. They are permanent. A Flame Thrall summoned at the entrance of a dungeon will be fighting beside you at the end. Dismiss it and resummon it at the next dungeon. The cost to cast is significant, enough magicka that lower level characters or those without cost reduction will struggle. But once cast, the maintenance cost is 0. With the Twin Souls perk, 2 permanent Atronachs can be maintained simultaneously. This means a Conjuration mage with full investment can have 2 endlessly patient, infinitely loyal Atronachs at their side for the duration of an entire playthrough, requiring only the initial cast and the occasional resurrection after battle. The school's design crescendos here into something that feels less like magic and more like command. The Hagraven's relationship to Nocturnal. In the Elder Scrolls lore, the Daedric Prince Nocturnal is described as kin to the Hags and the Hagravens. The precise nature of this kinship is deliberately vague, which is appropriate. Nocturnal is the prince of darkness, secrets, and the unknown, and her relationships with mortal beings are never clearly defined. What is confirmed is that there exists a Daedric entity called the Crow Mother, described as a hag-raven Daedric lord, who claims to be Nocturnal's nether niece. The Crow Mother spawned the Crow Daedra, who form the Blackfeather Court, an entire faction of Daedric Crow beings whose existence bridges the gap between the natural world associations of hag-ravens and the Oblivion Plane. This suggests that the transformation ritual that creates hag-ravens is not merely a dark magical practice, but may have genuine Daedric implications. That in choosing to become half-bird, half-woman, these witches are aligning themselves with something that echoes across Oblivion itself. The ravens that real-world mythology associates with wisdom, death, and prophecy find a strange resonance in the Elder Scrolls universe, where bird women serve as the spiritual leaders of an entire people. The Fortify Restoration Loop. Explained. Few exploits in Skyrim history have generated as much discussion as the Fortify Restoration Loop, and the reason it remains so fascinating is that it is not technically a cheat. It emerges from the interaction of three legitimate systems. The enchanting system allows gear to be enchanted with Fortify alchemy. The alchemy system allows potions to be brewed with Fortify enchanting bonuses. And the restoration system, due to what appears to be a miscategorized magical effect, responds to Fortify restoration potions in a way the developers did not intend, treating all active magical effects on the character as restoration effects and boosting them accordingly. When you drink a Fortify restoration potion while wearing Fortify alchemy enchanted gear, the game reads the alchemy bonus as a restoration effect and amplifies it. This lets you craft a stronger Fortify enchanting potion, which lets you apply a stronger Fortify alchemy enchantment, which lets you brew a more powerful Fortify restoration potion. Each cycle compounds. Players have documented armor ratings in the millions and weapon damage in the billions using nothing but this cascading loop applied enough times. It is not magic the game was designed to permit. It is magic that happened anyway. The Eye of Magnus, what it actually is. The central artifact of the College of Winterhold questline, the Eye of Magnus, sits in the Hall of the Elements as an object of fascination and dread. Faculty members and students circle it nervously, offering competing theories about its origin. Savos Aren, the Archmage, knows more than he admits. The Eye is not a creation of any mortal culture, or even any known Daedric prince. It is directly connected to Magnus himself, the god of magic who designed the mortal world before escaping it, leaving behind the sun as the hole through which he departed. Magnus's blueprint for reality was partially left behind in Mundus, and the Elder Scrolls are fragments of that record. The Eye appears to be a physical concentration of the same primordial magical energy Magnus once commanded. It is not merely powerful. It is a compressed remnant of the force that shaped the world. When Ancano attempts to harness it, he is not simply grabbing a weapon. He is reaching into a reservoir of magic that predates the current structure of reality itself, which is precisely why the Psijic Order arrives without warning to warn against touching it. They have seen what happens when mortals reach toward the tools of creation. The Forsworn's religious magic. The Forsworn are frequently dismissed by Skyrim's other factions as simple barbarians or murderous outlaws reclaiming stolen land. but their magical tradition is ancient and internally coherent in ways the game reveals only in fragments. Their shamans use a form of magic that blends destruction spellcasting with nature-based rituals, and their hag ravens, their spiritual matriarchs, perform ceremonies that appear to predate both the College of Winterhold's organized school system and the dragon cult's ritualized power. The Reach itself has been settled since before the Nords arrived in Skyrim, and the Reach folks' relationship with their land is spiritual as well as political. The word walls built by the dragon cult can be found within Forsworn territory at places like Lost Valley Redoubt, and the hag ravens perform their Briarheart ceremony directly in front of one. Whether out of indifference or deliberate appropriation of former power is never made clear. What is clear is that Forsworn magic is not improvised desperation. It is organized, purposeful, and suffused with a theology the game barely scratches the surface of. Mirak's Stolen Shouts. The primary antagonist of the Dragonborn DLC possesses a disturbing ability that sets him apart from every other shout user in the game, including the Dragonborn. Mirak can absorb dragon souls while standing in Apocrypha, Hermaeus Mora's realm, even when he is not physically present at a dragon's death. If you kill a dragon anywhere in Skyrim after triggering the Dragonborn questline, there is a chance that Mirak's spectral presence appears and steals the soul before you can absorb it. He simply reaches out from Apocrypha, takes the soul that should be yours, and vanishes. This is not a scripted story moment. It is a recurring mechanical intervention that can happen at any dragon kill, at any point in the questline. The frustration it generates is entirely intentional. You are experiencing exactly what the lore tells you Mirak has been doing for centuries, accumulating dragon souls and power while remaining sealed away in a Daedric realm, untouchable and growing stronger. When you finally confront him, those stolen souls return to you upon his defeat. Nocturnal's gift and the Skeleton Key's true nature. The Skeleton Key, obtained during the Thieves' Guild questline, is commonly treated as a practical reward, an unbreakable lockpick that never snaps. But its magical nature goes considerably deeper. The Skeleton Key is an artifact of Nocturnal, and it is specifically described in Thieves' Guild lore as a symbol of her power over fate and probability. Nocturnal's sphere encompasses luck, darkness, and the unseen, and the Skeleton Key represents the idea that all locks, all barriers, all limitations are merely illusions of certainty waiting to be undone. When Mercer Frey steals the key, he does so knowing it will give him the ability to bypass any lock, physical, metaphorical, or perhaps even cosmic. The questline suggests that having the key in the wrong hands disrupts Nocturnal's influence over luck itself, which is why the guild begins experiencing a run of misfortune. Returning the key is not merely resolving a theft, it is restoring the balance of a Daedric prince's sphere of influence over the mortal world, and that distinction makes the final quest feel considerably heavier than a simple artifact return usually would. Arniel's Shade and the Mistake that Cannot Be Undone. One of the college's quieter quest lines follows the researcher Arniel Gain as he obsessively pursues the secret behind the Dwemer disappearance. After completing his series of errands, gathering soul gems, delivering a warped soul gem, Arniel uses a recreation of the legendary weapon keening on a charged soul gem and vanishes. The questline ends without resolution, without explanation, and without a body. but the story continues in a hidden reward. After Arniel's disappearance, his shade can be summoned as a conjuration power, a ghostly version of him that fights alongside you for 60 seconds before fading. He says nothing. He cannot be spoken to. He simply appears when called, assists, and vanishes. The shade suggests he did not die. Upweigum, he underwent the same process that claimed the Dwemer. He is somewhere else, or nowhere, or everywhere, caught in whatever mechanism the Dwemer triggered when they vanished from history. His shade in your service is the closest the game comes to an answer, and it is not an answer at all. The Psijic Order's temporal magic, the Psijic Order, the ancient monastic organization that sends members to warn you about the Eye of Magnus, practice a form of magic called the Old Ways, a discipline predating even the school system used by the College of Winterhold. Within the game's lore, the Psijic Order is associated with mysticism, the school of magic removed from Skyrim entirely, and with temporal magic specifically. They are capable of appearing and disappearing without travel, communicating across vast distances and perceiving events before they happen. In Skyrim's gameplay, they manifest to you 5 times during the college quest line, delivering warnings and eventually intervening to contain the Eye of Magnus. Each appearance is brief and unexplained. They offer no extended conversation, no faction quest, and no recruitment. Their involvement suggests an organization observing events across time, rather than simply reacting to them. And their sudden departure from the Isle of Artaeum, their home, which literally vanished from the maps, hundreds of years before Skyrim is set, implies a level of cosmic deliberateness that the game never explains. The Storm Atronach's death detonation. Storm Atronachs are frequently summoned as the strongest of the standard Atronach variants, superior in combat power to both Flame and Frost Atronachs. Players who use them extensively know their shock-based chain lightning attacks and their immunity to shock damage, which makes them excellent partners against most enemies. What many players fail to register is what happens when a Storm Atronach dies in battle. If the summon timer expires while the Atronach is still alive, it simply dissipates. But if the Atronach is killed, reduced to 0 health by an enemy, it detonates in a shock explosion that damages everything nearby, including you. This death explosion can be genuinely dangerous at close range, particularly during indoor battles where you and the Atronach are fighting in the same confined space. The game provides no warning about this behavior, and the first time you lose a Storm Atronach to enemy fire while standing next to it, the resulting shock blast is startling enough to have killed many unaware players. The death explosion is not a penalty. It is a final combat act, but it requires spatial awareness that the spell description never mentions. Colette's persistent dignity. There is a woman at the College of Winterhold who is, by any reasonable measure, the most quietly resilient character in the game. Colette Marens is the expert instructor for restoration, a school that her own colleagues openly mock, leave, snide notes about in her personal spaces, and dismiss in faculty gossip as better left to temple priests. Colette knows this. She refers to it directly in her lectures, defending restoration's legitimacy with a precision that suggests she has rehearsed the argument many times. She has been fighting this particular battle long enough that the fight has become part of her identity. What the game reveals slowly through her dialogue and behavior is that she is correct. Restoration is among the most versatile and powerful schools in Skyrim. The Necromage perk alone, available exclusively through Restoration, enables some of the most broken character builds in the game. The school that her colleagues dismiss can turn a vampire into a near unstoppable magical entity. Colette does not know about the Necromage exploit, but her stubborn, unbitter insistence that her discipline deserves respect turns out to be vindicated in ways she will never fully realize. The Dwemer automatons, persistent programming. The Dwemer constructed their mechanical servants, the various spheres, spiders, and centurions found in ruins across Skyrim. With magical programming that has persisted for over 4,000 years, without maintenance or external instruction. The Dwemer vanished in the First Era during the Battle of Red Mountain, leaving their creations still operating as intended. These are not beings who became confused or dormant after millennia without masters. They continue to patrol their designated routes, attack intruders within their designated zones, and maintain the thermal systems that keep Dwemer ruins from becoming entirely inoperable. From a magical engineering standpoint, this represents the most durable arcane programming in the game's history. The magic powering dwarven automatons is not soul-powered in the conventional sense. It draws from the steam systems built into the ruins, powered by geothermal energy, combined with some form of magical instruction that has remained legible after thousands of years. Whatever the Dwemer understood about preserving magical intent, they encoded it in brass and crystal so thoroughly that their abandoned creations remain more reliable than most of the living mages in Skyrim. The words assigned to each shout have meaning. Every dragon shout in Skyrim is composed of 3 words in the dragon language, and those words were not selected arbitrarily. The word fus means force, ro means balance, and da means push. Unrelenting force is literally a phrase meaning force, balance, push, a conceptual description of what the shout accomplishes. Fame Z Gron, the become ethereal shout, means fade, spirit, bind. To become ethereal is to bind your spirit in a faded state. Kri Lun Aus, marked for death, means kill, leech, suffer. The naming convention is not merely decorative. It reflects the underlying principle that words in the dragon language are not labels for concepts, but the concepts themselves, given voice. To speak Fus is not to describe force, it is to project it. This is why learning words from word walls functions differently from reading a book. The wall does not explain the word, it transmits it, carving the meaning directly into the comprehension of anyone with the capacity to receive it. The entire system of written dragon language scattered across Skyrim's ruins is, in this light, not history. It is dormant power waiting for the right voice. Serana's unique vampiric knowledge. Within the Dawnguard DLC, Serana stands apart from virtually every other character in Skyrim by possessing a form of conjuration knowledge that she describes as rare even among vampires. She can summon bone men, skeletal undead warriors drawn from the soul cairn, using a spell she developed partly through her time spent imprisoned with an Elder Scroll. More significantly, she is among the few beings in the game who understands the true nature of the soul, cairn, and has visited it while conscious and intentional rather than as a trapped soul. Her academic understanding of necromantic magic, the ideal masters, and the mechanics of soul trapping is more sophisticated than anything offered by the College of Winterhold. She is also unique in that she is a pure-blooded vampire, infected directly by Molag Bal, rather than through the diluted bloodline of an existing vampire, which means her vampiric abilities are categorically more powerful than any other vampire encountered in gameplay. She uses Drain Life, Icy Spear, and Raise Dead, among others, and her versions of these spells are stronger than comparable player-castable versions, Kyne's Blessing and the High Hrothgar tablets. Along the 7,000 steps leading up to High Hrothgar, 18 stone tablets are placed at intervals, each bearing an inscription in the common tongue about the history of the Thu'um and the founding of the Greybeard's Order. Most players read a handful and then hurry toward the monastery. Few read all 18, but those who do, and who return to explore the mountain path thoroughly, may discover an interaction that operates entirely without announcement. According to in-game information, activating every tablet on the path grants a temporary blessing that makes animals passive toward you for 24 real-time hours. The wildlife that might otherwise attack you, wolves, snow bears, ice wolves, simply ignore your presence. This blessing is named in lore after Kyne, the Nordic goddess of the sky and wind, who is credited with originally teaching mortals to use the Thu'um. It suggests that the path to High Hrothgar is not merely a road, but a pilgrimage, and completing it fully, paying attention to every word carved in stone, earns a kind of sacred protection from the natural world. The concentration of magicka in race. One of Skyrim's quieter design decisions involves the racial bonuses that different character races receive at character creation. The High Elves, the Altmer, begin with an additional 50 points of magicka, reflecting their historical dominance of the magical arts in Tamriel. This bonus persists at full value throughout the entire game. For pure mage builds, this 50-point advantage means slightly more sustained casting before depletion, slightly more tolerance for high-cost spells, and slightly more breathing room in encounters where magicka management determines survival. The Altmer also received the Highborn racial power, which restores magicka at an accelerated rate for 60 seconds once per day. But what the game does not make obvious is that these racial advantages compound with every subsequent magicka investment. Each level-up attribute choice of magicka adds 10 points. Each piece of gear with Fortify magicka adds its bonus to the total. The Altmer's 50-point head start means that over the course of a playthrough, these investments all build on a larger foundation than any other race, making the choice of Altmer for a mage character not merely cosmetic, but mathematically meaningful across hundreds of hours. Paralysis spells and sneak attack multipliers. The paralysis spell and the paralysis enchantment on weapons creates a specific mechanical opportunity that is one of Skyrim's more dangerous cross-school interactions. An enemy who is paralyzed is categorized by the game as unconscious, and unconscious enemies can be hit with sneak attack multipliers, regardless of whether you are in stealth at the time. This means that an illusion mage or stealth-oriented character who has access to paralysis can use it as an on-demand setup for sneak attack damage, targeting an enemy, waiting for them to fall rigid to the ground, and then striking with a sneak attack bonus that might otherwise require extensive positioning and careful dungeon navigation to achieve. For daggers which carry a sneak attack multiplier of 15 times normal damage, With the appropriate perk, paralyzed enemies represent something close to an instant kill option, regardless of their level. A high-level Draugr, who would survive a straightforward attack sequence, can be paralyzed, struck with a 15 times damage dagger hit, and removed from combat before they are able to take a single action. The college entrance tests hidden variable. When Feralda stands at the gate of the College of Winterhold Bridge and demands that you demonstrate magical aptitude, the specific spell she requires is not fixed. Her test selects from a pool of 5 possible spells: Fear, Firebolt, Mage Light, Healing Hands, or Conjure Flame Atronach. The selection is randomized each time you speak to her. If you do not know the spell she requests, she will offer to sell it to you for 30 gold. What most players do not realize is that her randomized demand can be entirely bypassed through 2 alternative methods. If your speech skill is high enough, you can persuade her that you deserve entry without a demonstration. And if you are progressing through the main quest and have reached the Elder Knowledge stage, you can demonstrate a dragon shout instead, with the ancient language of the Dova, serving as sufficient proof of ability for entry into a mage's college. The flexibility of the entrance requirements subtly reinforces something Skyrim repeats throughout its design. There is almost always more than one way in. Drevis Nelloran's accidental transparency, the Illusion Master. Drevis Nelloran has a character quirk that, once you notice it, transforms him from a minor faculty NPC into one of the college's most quietly fascinating people. Drevis is frequently mid-experiment when players encounter him, and those experiments sometimes involve self-applied illusion magic that has not entirely succeeded. He can be found wandering the college while partially invisible, a transparency he is unaware of since he believes himself fully hidden. When approached, he expresses genuine surprise and discomfort that someone can see him. He will sometimes apologize, adjust his spell, and wander off in search of better privacy. This single recurring behavior tells an entire story. Here is the master of illusion, the person who has devoted his life to the art of manipulating perception, frequently unable to manage his own invisibility properly. Whether this is absent-mindedness, overconfidence, or simply the nature of experimentation is never stated, but it humanizes a school that could easily seem cold and manipulative. The master of deception cannot reliably hide himself from casual observers. There is something genuinely endearing about that. Morocke and the Labyrinthian Tragedy. The dragon priest Morocke, encountered deep within Labyrinthian during the college questline, wears a mask that provides 100% magicka cost reduction, a nearly peerless bonus for any magic build. But the context in which he is found adds a layer of melancholy to the acquisition. The previous archmage, Savos Aren, was part of a group of 6 students who ventured into Labyrinthian decades before the events of Skyrim. An expedition led not by Savos himself, but by Atma, the archmage's favorite student, driven by ambition for magical secrets and hidden treasures. The ruins consumed them one by one. Only 3 reached the final chamber: Savos, Atma, and Hafna Icefist. Facing Morocke and knowing they could not destroy him, Savos made a choice that would define his life from that point forward. He enthralled his 2 surviving companions, binding their consciousness and life force to an eternal purpose: maintain the ward that kept Morocco sealed. When you descend into Labyrinthian during the college questline, you find those 2 mages still standing at their posts. They have been there for decades, Savos returned to Winterhold, became Archmage, and never spoke of what happened. When the ward eventually fails and Morocco rises again, the chain of consequence spirals directly back to what Savos did in that chamber. Morocco's mask, once worn, carries that history. Magic resistance has a hard ceiling. Among Skyrim's many hidden mathematical rules is one that directly limits how invincible any character can become against magical damage. Regardless of how many resist magic enchantments you stack, how many potions you drink, or how many racial bonuses you layer, magic resistance is capped at 85%. You cannot reach 100%. You cannot become immune to spell damage through resistance alone. This ceiling was built deliberately into the game to prevent characters from trivializing magical combat entirely. Above 85%, any additional resist magic effect is wasted. Players who invest heavily in resistance stacking gear without knowing this ceiling often discover that the final 10 or 15% of potential resistance they are chasing will never be achievable. The workaround, spell absorption, which has a separate ceiling of 100% and operates through a different mechanic, is the path to complete magical immunity for those who pursue it. But resistance and absorption are distinct systems, and conflating them leads many players to build defensively in the wrong direction. Shalidor's Maze and the Labyrinthian Archive. Shalidor was among the most powerful mages in recorded Nordic history, a legendary archmage from the First Era, who shaped the College of Winterhold's founding principles and reportedly moved entire cities with a single shout. One of his surviving works is Labyrinthian, not merely the dungeon as players encounter it, but the original magical archive he constructed within. The vast ruin that Bethesda built contains the bones of what Shalidor intended, a repository of magical knowledge, a test for worthy mages, and a demonstration of the kind of arcane architecture that first Era masters could construct without the assistance of the dragon cult's labor. The Ghostblade, Ghostwolf, and other supernatural defenders Shalidor installed still function millennia later. The dragon priest inhabiting the deepest chamber presumably arrived after Shalidor's time. The ruin was claimed by the cult between its construction and the events of Skyrim. What Shalidor actually placed in the innermost chambers and what the dragon cult displaced or destroyed is a gap the game gestures at but never fills. The Apprentice Stone's dangerous trade. Standing stones are one of Skyrim's quieter systems, offering passive bonuses to characters who activate them. The Mage Stones, Apprentice, Atronach, and Mage all provide advantages for magic-focused builds. The Apprentice Stone doubles your magicka regeneration rate, which sounds straightforwardly beneficial. But the stone's cost is almost never discussed. You are twice as susceptible to magical damage while its effect is active. This means that a character who activates the Apprentice Stone and fights mages or dragons is accepting a significant defensive penalty in exchange for faster resource recovery. Against physically oriented enemies, the trade-off barely matters. Against magical ones, Thalmor agents, enemy mages, conjurers, dragon breath attacks, the doubled vulnerability can translate directly into death in situations where a character with no stone would survive. Players who activate the Apprentice Stone for the regeneration bonus and forget about the vulnerability penalty often find themselves dying to sources of magical damage that seem disproportionately powerful. without ever connecting the cause to the stone they activated hours earlier. The invisibility dispel conditions. Invisibility is among illusion's most powerful spells, but it operates with a set of conditions that many players discover only after casting it confidently and finding it unexpectedly dispelled. Invisibility is broken the moment you perform any action that the game classifies as active. Attacking breaks it. Opening doors breaks it. Picking up items breaks it. Picking locks breaks it. Even drinking a potion breaks it, as consuming an item is an active choice in the game's logic. However, certain actions do not break invisibility. Waiting, standing still, and casting certain spells if the silent casting perk is active. Interestingly, some environmental interactions have ambiguous behavior. Touching an NPC or bumping into them can sometimes break invisibility and sometimes does not, depending on the specific collision detected. The spell was designed to reward careful, deliberate movement and punish careless players who treat it as a permanent off switch for danger. In practice, invisibility is most reliable when used as a repositioning tool, a brief window to move from one cover point to another, rather than a sustained state of untouchability. Potema's necromantic legacy. The Wolf Queen of Solitude, Potema, who appears as a side quest line involving her resurrection by a rogue cult, has one of the more extensively documented histories of any named character in Skyrim's lore. During her reign in the Third Era, Potema wielded necromantic magic on a scale unprecedented in recorded history, raising armies of undead from her enemies' fallen soldiers and using them to fight her wars of conquest, rather than replacing her casualties with living troops. Her kingdom became, in the words of the lore, a land of death, a territory where the undead outnumbered the living, and the smell of decay was simply part of daily existence. She was eventually defeated, and her physical form ended, but her spirit persisted, held partially coherent by the cult attempting to restore her in Skyrim's present. The questline reveals that she is not truly dead in the conventional sense. She's been maintaining a form of self-necromancy, preserving her consciousness through sheer magical will while waiting for conditions that would allow her return. Even her defeat in Skyrim's events does not feel entirely final. Her voice fades rather than cuts off. The telekinesis leveling exploit. Telekinesis is an alteration spell that allows you to grab and manipulate objects from a distance, useful for puzzle solving and for flinging objects at enemies as improvised projectiles. It is generally considered a novelty, atmospheric and occasionally useful, but rarely the most efficient tool. But telekinesis has a hidden mechanical property that experienced players exploit for rapid skill advancement. The spell generates alteration experience continuously while active. Furthermore, an item held in a telekinesis grip while fast traveling accumulates distance-based experience for the full duration of the travel, even though fast travel is normally instantaneous in lived experience. Players who cast telekinesis on any object and then fast travel across Skyrim accumulate enormous amounts of alteration experience in what is functionally zero real-world time, arriving at their destination with alteration advanced by multiple levels. This exploit works because the game calculates experience based on in-world time elapsed during travel rather than real time, and fast travel compresses hundreds of in-world minutes into seconds of screen load time. The companion's werewolf magic, the werewolf transformation granted to the companions, and eventually to the Dragonborn, is technically a form of Daedric magic rather than a natural condition, though the game rarely frames it this way explicitly. The Glenmoril witches who passed the beast blood to the Ancient Circle were serving Hircine, the Daedric prince of the hunt. Every transformation is a partial invocation of Hircine's power, which is why werewolves who die before curing their condition are claimed by Hircine's realm of oblivion, the hunting grounds, rather than passing to whatever afterlife they would otherwise qualify for. The beast form itself is not merely a shape-shifting ability, it is a divine transformation, a temporary borrowing of a form that belongs to Hircine's sphere. The howl that sends animals running is not an ordinary sound. It carries with it an echo of Hircine's authority over the natural world, a vibration at a frequency that prey creatures recognize as the call of the apex predator. Ayla, the huntress, who refuses to cure her lycanthropy even when given the option, understands this on a theological level that the quest line only touches briefly. The Atronach Forge's unbound summons. When the Atronach Forge beneath the College of Winterhold produces an Atronach, it does so through a different mechanism than the conjuration summons a player casts. Player cast conjuration summons produce bound Atronachs, creatures temporarily pulled from oblivion and obligated to serve. The Atronachs produced by the Forge, by contrast, are unbound. They emerge from the portal in a state of complete independence, without magical compulsion to serve. They are consequently immediately hostile. An Atronach conjured from the Forge will attack you, the mages nearby, and anyone in range. This is not a malfunction. It reflects the fundamental difference between binding magic and creation magic. The Forge does not reach into oblivion and pull a servant. It opens a portal and invites something through, and whatever accepts the invitation arrives on its own terms. Players who use the Forge to craft items rather than creatures can bypass this entirely. But those who attempt to use the Forge's Atronach recipes as a cheap summoning solution discover quickly that unbound Daedra are substantially more dangerous than bound ones. The Aetherius connection to Magicka. In the Elder Scrolls cosmology, Magicka is not a resource that exists within individual beings independently. It is a flow, a continuous current that pours from Aetherius, the realm of pure light and magic, through the sun and stars into Mundus, the mortal world. The sun is, in lore, the whole left behind when Magnus, the god of magic and architect of the mortal plane's design, escaped before creation was complete, and through that hole Magicka continuously flows. This means every spell cast in Skyrim draws on light from beyond the stars. Your Magicka bar does not represent personal power, but rather the rate at which you can channel ambient cosmic energy. Race, enchantments, and perks affect how wide that channel is. The night's darkness literally reduces the flow for vampires, which is why their stats suffer in sunlight, not because the sun hurts them, but because their undead physiology struggles to process the intense Magicka output. Standing at High Hrothgar's summit, the sky barely blocked by anything, a mage is arguably closer to the source of all magical energy than they could be anywhere else in the game. Hermaeus Mora's library and forbidden knowledge. The Daedric prince Hermaeus Mora rules a realm called Apocrypha, an infinite plane composed entirely of books, scrolls, and knowledge of every kind, including knowledge that was never meant to exist. He is the Daedric prince of fate, memory, and forbidden knowledge, and his interactions in both the main game and the Dragonborn DLC reveal a consistent character trait that distinguishes him from most other Daedric princes. He does not desire worship or conquest. He desires information. Every transaction Mora makes involves knowledge as currency. He offers power in exchange for secrets. He grants the Black Books, portals to Apocrypha, to mortals who have demonstrated the desire to know things they should not. The Skull Shaman's ancestral traditions, Mirak's mastery of shouts, even the Dragonborn's own blood. Mora collects these the way a scholar collects rare volumes, without attachment and without sentiment. The Black Books in the Dragonborn DLC each contain unique abilities, but the ability to reread them and change your selected reward suggests that Mora views these exchanges as ongoing negotiations rather than permanent transactions. The significance of soul gem size. Soul gems in Skyrim come in 5 sizes: petty, lesser, common, greater, and grand, corresponding to the size of souls that can be captured within them. Black soul gems occupy a separate category entirely, capable of capturing human and mer souls, which are always classified as grand regardless of the individual's power level. What the game implies, but never states directly, is that the distinction between soul sizes is not arbitrary game design, but reflects actual metaphysical categories. According to lore, smaller creatures have smaller souls, not because their lives are worth less, but because their consciousness and complexity produce less of what the ideal masters who govern the soul cairn are able to use. A pony's soul sends a pony to the soul cairn. A dragon, priest's soul sends something considerably larger and stranger. The gem must be sized appropriately, not as a container, but as a conduit. The wrong-sized gem fails to complete the soul-trapping process, which is why a petty gem cannot hold a bear's soul. The magic simply will not fit, the same way a narrow river cannot carry an ocean. The Sigic monks and Artium's disappearance. The Sigic order occupied the Isle of Artium, a mysterious island that appears and disappears from the mortal world at intervals that have no predictable pattern. In the lore connecting Skyrim to the earlier games, Artaeum vanished from maps roughly 100 years before the events of Skyrim. No one knows where it went. The Sigics themselves decline to explain, and their continued ability to manifest within Skyrim, appearing to the Dragonborn at the college, speaking directly into your experience without physical travel, suggests that the island's disappearance was deliberate rather than accidental. The Order studies the old ways, the original magical practice of Nirn that predates the organized school system by thousands of years. Their ability to arrive and depart without traversing physical space implies access to temporal and spatial magic far beyond what even the most advanced college mage can produce. When they warn you about the Eye of Magnus, it is not because they happen to be passing by. They are there because they already knew you would need the warning. Whether that knowledge comes from prophecy, temporal perception, or something else entirely, is one of the most intriguing unanswered questions in the game. The Loverstone's hidden mechanic. The Loverstone, one of the 13 standing stones scattered across Skyrim, grants a passive 20% experience bonus to all skills simultaneously. Most players who use it do so for exactly this reason, choosing the universal bonus over the more specialized bonuses of the individual warrior, thief, or mage stones. But the Lover Stone has a lesser-known quirk in how it interacts with the Lover's Comfort bonus. The temporary experience buff granted by sleeping in a bed owned by or next to someone who loves you. Both the stone and the comfort effect provide experience bonuses, but they do not stack. The comfort effect replaces the stone's bonus rather than adding to it, meaning players who carefully cultivate the sleeping bonus and maintain the Lover Stone simultaneously are not receiving the cumulative benefit they might expect. The game provides no notification that this stacking does not occur, leaving players to discover through careful observation, or to simply never know, that two of their experience bonuses have been cancelling each other's benefit since the first night they slept beside a spouse. The Greybeards cannot speak without consequence. There is one final detail about the Greybeards that ties together everything that makes them extraordinary and quietly tragic. Arngir, the only one of the gathered masters who speaks with you directly, does so because the others literally cannot. Bori, Wulfgar, and Einath have so thoroughly internalized the Thu'um that ordinary speech carries the force of a shout. When they speak a word, it has power. When they merely clear their throats, stone can crack. The Greybeards who cannot speak conduct all communication through gesture, through Arngir's translation, and through the formal ritual shouts they use during ceremonies. Carefully controlled outbursts of the very force they are constantly containing. This sacrifice is not an accident of their training. It is the result. The price of mastering the Thu'um completely for ordinary mortals is the loss of ordinary speech. Only the Dragonborn avoids this consequence, because a dragon's soul can hold the voice without the voice overtaking the speaker. The Greybeards chose silence. The Dragonborn was born with an exemption they will never fully appreciate. The Ward's hidden recharge mechanic. Wards are one of the most underestimated spells in Skyrim, and the reason most players abandon them is that they never discover how the system actually works. When a ward is struck by a spell, it doesn't simply absorb or deflect the attack. The ward has its own internal pool of hit points, called ward power, that depletes with each hit. If that pool reaches 0, the ward shatters and you stagger. But the detail most players miss is that the ward begins regenerating its power immediately and automatically, even while it is still being struck by further spells. The regeneration rate is constant and does not pause during combat. This means that a sustained stream of low damage magic, like flames or frostbite from a weaker enemy, may never actually break your ward at all, because the ward is rebuilding itself faster than it is being depleted. There is a full second of charging time when you first raise a ward, during which it is at 0 power and completely vulnerable to a single strong hit. But once charged, its self-repairing nature makes it far more durable than the brief stagger animation suggests. Dragons are particularly dangerous here, not because their breath is powerful in the traditional sense, but because the game treats dragon breath as a rapid series of small hits, a constant, stuttering assault that chews through ward power faster than players expect. Falion's unsolved secret. There is a mage living on the edge of Morthal who carries one of the most deliberately unresolved mysteries in the entire game. His name is Falion, a Redguard conjurer, master trainer, and the only person in Skyrim who can cure vampirism if you bring him a filled black soul gem. By day, he sells spell tomes and takes a nap at 3 in the afternoon. By night, something else entirely is happening. If you wait outside his house past 1 in the morning, you can follow him into the surrounding marshes where he walks alone to a summoning circle north of town. If confronted there, he becomes defensive and offers you 200 gold to stay quiet. His adopted ward, a girl named Agni, mentions having bad dreams in which Thalion fights monsters while she sleeps. The Jarl of Morthal, herself a seer, says she has had visions of Thalion but never explained what she saw. If you report him, the Jarl confronts him. He promises to stop and then simply continues going to the circle every night. The quest associated with Thalion has no resolution. No definitive answer is ever given. The leading theory among players is that he is using the summoning stones to combat the vampire threat encroaching on Morthal, protecting the town from the inside quietly at personal risk, without ever receiving acknowledgement or thanks. Whether that is true or not is left entirely to your interpretation. Dragonhide and the Armour of Living Stone. There is a master-level alteration spell that almost no one uses correctly, and even fewer reach in the first place. Dragonhide requires completion of the alteration ritual spell quest and an alteration skill of at least 90 before Tolfdir will even teach it to you. Once you have it, it grants 80% physical damage reduction for 30 seconds. That 80% matches the absolute cap achievable by any set of physical armor, the equivalent of a displayed rating of 567. But what makes Dragonhide quietly extraordinary is how it stacks with existing armor. If your armor is equipped before you cast the spell, Dragonhide's reduction adds on top of your normal armor rating through a separate calculation, potentially pushing your effective physical protection to 96%, far beyond anything achievable by gear alone. Dragonhide is also one of only 2 master spells that can technically be dual cast to increase its duration, with the stability perk extending it further, and vampirism combined with necromage pushing it further still. The spell can remain active for close to 3 minutes per cast. A dragonborn standing in full armor with Dragonhide active is, for that window, one of the most physically resistant entities in the entire game world, made more ironic by the fact that the spell works best on characters wearing robes. The Companions, Stolen Souls. The Companions of Whiterun are Skyrim's most famous warrior guild, bound by honor and strength and the legacy of Ysgramor's 500. What many players do not fully appreciate is the nature of the deal that corrupted their inner circle, and the theological weight of what it cost them. Sometime in the late 3rd era or early 4th era, a harbinger named Terfig made a pact with the witches of Glenmoral Coven. The terms, as the Companions understood them, were that their inner circle would be granted great power in exchange for hunting in the name of Hircine. The power they received was lycanthropy, the beast, blood of the werewolf. What they were not told, or perhaps were misled about, was that the affliction would be permanent and that it would claim their souls in death. Nords who die in honorable combat are carried to Sovngarde. Werewolves are not. When a lycanthrope dies, Hircine's claim on the beast blood within them pulls their soul directly into his realm of oblivion, the hunting grounds, where they run forever as prey and predator in his eternal hunt. Kodlak Whitemane, the harbinger present at the time of the game, views this not as a blessing but as a spiritual theft. He wants to die a Nord and reach Sovngarde, and knows his beast blood will prevent it. The The entire companion's questline is, at its heart, about the consequences of a magical bargain no one living fully understood when it was signed. The Glenmoril heads and their stored magic. When the companion's questline sends you to destroy the Glenmoril Coven, you are not simply eliminating a nest of hagravens as a matter of revenge for what they did to the Inner Circle. You are collecting the only existing cure for a centuries-old magical curse stored in the most unusual vessel imaginable. The cure for lycanthropy in Skyrim does not come from a potion, a ritual book, or an alchemical formula. It exists inside the severed heads of the Glenmoril witches themselves. Each head, when brought to the flame of the Harbinger deep in Ysgramor's tomb, can be used to purge the wolf spirit from a soul, calling forth a spectral version of the werewolf within and destroying it before the soul can be fully claimed by Hircine. The heads are described in lore as containing the magic of the witches who cast the original curse. Killing a hagraven and carrying its disembodied head functions not merely as a grim trophy, but as a vessel of stored magical power, concentrated enough to undo a Daedric prince's claim on a mortal soul. Kodlak cannot use this method in life because the Silver Hand murders him before it can happen, but his ghost, still present in the tomb, is able to be cleansed through the ritual after death. It is one of the few moments in the game where magic achieves something that the ordinary rules of life and death would have otherwise made impossible. Shalidor and the labyrinth he left behind, tucked within the ruins of what was once Bromjunar. Believed by some historians to have been the capital of Skyrim during the height of the dragon cult, lies a structure built by one of the most powerful mages who ever lived. Shalidor the Archmage was a figure of the First Era, whose legends are so vast that scholars struggle to separate fact from mythology. He was said to have built the city of Winterhold with a single whispered spell, to have fought entire Dwemer legions alone, and to have stolen the secret of eternal life directly from Akatosh. Many of these stories are considered exaggerations. What is not exaggerated is his creation of Labyrinthian. Shalidor constructed the maze as a test for new archmages, a gauntlet that demanded both academic magical knowledge and the raw physical endurance to navigate miles of a crumbling dragon cult ruin just to reach the entrance. Many candidates died before they even entered the maze proper. The maze itself is unicursal, meaning there is only one path and no true choice of direction. But it requires practical mastery of all four major schools of magic to unlock its gates in sequence. The note found on a charred corpse at the entrance reads, "Enter twice, exit only once. Alteration will lead you to destruction. Only illusion shows the way to restoration. A puzzle wrapped in a riddle, left behind by a mage who built tests because he believed that those who could not pass them had no business leading the world's magical institutions. The ward that feeds on spells. There is a perk in the Restoration School that transforms wards from an expensive magical defense into a self-sustaining engine for a battle mage. The ward absorb perk causes your wards to restore magicka whenever they are struck by a hostile spell, converting a portion of the incoming magical attack into fuel for your reserves. On the surface, this sounds straightforward, but the mechanic has a subtle depth that rewards careful play. Wards block spider venom attacks and frostbite spider poison because the game classifies these as magical in nature. They block Chorus poison for the same reason. This means a ward using mage venturing into Fulmer territory or Dwemer ruins is passively shielded against environmental magical damage that has nothing to do with traditional spellcasters. The ward also blocks the disarm shout, meaning a well-timed ward can prevent a Draga Death Overlord from ripping your weapon from your hand mid-fight. What Ward Absorb does not do is stack cleanly with other forms of spell absorption. If you already have the Atronach perk or Standing Stone active, spells that are absorbed before reaching you provide no magicka to the ward, because the ward never gets the opportunity to interact with them. The two systems exist in parallel rather than in combination, and understanding which one to rely on shapes the entire character of a ward-focused mage build. Transmute and the Philosopher's Mage. There is a spell in the Alteration School that most players stumble across early and immediately set aside, and a smaller number who recognize what it quietly enables. Transmute Mineral Ore is an adept level spell found in 2 fixed dungeon locations: Halted Stream Camp northwest of Whiterun and Ansilvund in the Rift. It converts iron ore to silver ore and silver ore to gold ore, one piece at a time. What elevates it beyond a simple convenience is the chain of skills it touches. Casting transmute levels. Alteration. Converting iron to gold ore and then smelting it and crafting rings or amulets levels smithing. Enchanting those rings and selling them levels both. Enchanting and speech. The entire economic loop, from raw iron pulled out of a mine to enchanted jewelry sold at market, begins with a single adept level spell. The game's lore notes quietly acknowledge this too, flagging transmute as a probable reference to the Philosopher's Stone, the mythical alchemical object that transforms base metals into gold. There is also a quirk worth knowing. Transmute prioritizes silver ore over iron, converting existing silver to gold before it will touch iron. If you want multiple silver ore pieces from a stack of iron without losing them to the gold conversion, you have to drop your silver on the ground before casting, pick it back up, and repeat. The spell is less a shortcut and more a slow, meditative process that rewards patience, fitting perhaps for a bedtime audience. The Guardian Circle's secret magicka engine. The Guardian Circle is a master-level restoration spell that creates a zone of healing and undead repulsion centered wherever you stand when you cast it. And like all master spells, it takes 3 full seconds to cast while you stand completely motionless and vulnerable. Most players who reach this level of restoration use it defensively. Drop the circle, stand in it, let it heal you while undead flee. What very few players discover is the secondary interaction that turns the Guardian Circle into something else entirely. If you have the Atronach perk from the Alteration skill tree, which provides a 30% chance to absorb hostile spells and convert them into magicka. The healing pulses emitted by the Guardian Circle are classified by the game as external magical effects striking your character. Rather than healing you, they are absorbed. This means that a mage standing in their own Guardian Circle with the Atronach perk active is continuously absorbing the circle's healing magic and converting it into magicka, creating an essentially self-renewing reserve that persists for as long as the 60-second spell duration holds. The circle costs a significant amount of magicka to cast, but the return, near continuous magicka regeneration for a full minute, more than compensates. It is the kind of interaction that feels accidental, as though two systems collided in a way the designers did not fully intend, and the result is a master mage who can stand in a glowing ring of light and become, briefly, almost inexhaustible. Savos Aren and the ghosts he left in Labyrinthian. Before he became the Archmage of the College of Winterhold, Savos Aren was a student, one of 6 mages who ventured into Labyrinthian searching for magical treasures and the writings of Shalidor. The expedition was led by Atma, the Archmage's favourite student, who had convinced the group it would be straightforward. It was not. The ruins consumed them one by one, Gerduin to a skeletal dragon, Elvali Veren to something in the dark, takes in light to despair. 3 survived to the deepest, Chamber, Savos, Atma, and Hafna Icefist. There they found Moroke. Facing annihilation, Savos made a choice that would define his life from that point forward. He enthralled his 2 surviving companions, binding them to an eternal purpose. Maintain the ward that kept Moroke sealed so he could escape alone. When you descend into Labyrinthian during the college questline, you encounter those 2 mages, apparitions of Atma and Hafna, still standing at their posts, still holding the ward, frozen in the moment of their sacrifice. They have been there for decades. Savos returned to Winterhold, became Archmage, and never spoke of what happened. He built a life over the grave of what he did in that chamber. When the ward eventually fails and Moroke rises again, it is because Savos himself is involved in something that disrupts the magical balance, a consequence that spirals back to the decision he made in the dark. The college quest line is, in part, the story of one man's buried guilt consuming everything around him. The transmute that launders stolen ore. There is a detail buried in the transmute mineral ore spell that most players will never encounter unless they are specifically playing a thief or a mage who steals from mining camps. Ore flagged as stolen in your inventory carries the standard stolen marker. It cannot be sold to most merchants, and guards will notice it during searches. But if you cast transmute on a piece of stolen iron or silver ore, the resulting ore that emerges from the transformation loses its stolen status entirely. The transmutation process, in the game's logic, creates a new item from the raw material. Whatever legal or criminal history the original ore carried does not transfer to what it becomes. A sack of stolen iron ore, passed through the transmute spell and converted to gold, becomes a legitimate commodity that can be sold, smelted, or stored without consequence. It is a loophole that sits quietly in the mechanics of the game, never advertised and never patched. Whether it represents an oversight or a deliberate acknowledgement that alchemical transformation fundamentally changes the nature of a substance is unclear, but it creates the interesting scenario of a mage who doubles as a fence, purifying stolen goods through the application of alteration magic. Mage Light's weight and the pressure plate problem. Mage Light is a simple alteration spell. You cast a glowing orb that sticks to whatever surface or target you aim at, illuminating an area for 60 seconds. Most players use it as a torch substitute, or attach it to enemies as a way to counter invisibility. But Mage Light has a physical property that is almost never discussed. The orb has actual weight. When it travels through the air and lands on a surface, it interacts with the game's physics system in ways that go beyond simple illumination. A Mage Light orb can trigger pressure plates. Not all plates, and not always, reliably, but the spell can activate floor traps from a safe distance by landing on them before you walk across. In dungeons with fire tile traps, where only some floor tiles shoot flames, a well-aimed mage light cast can reveal which tiles are dangerous by triggering them remotely, allowing you to map a safe path through the room without taking any damage. The orb can also trigger swinging spike walls and other mechanical traps by landing on their activation points. This transforms a utility spell with a secondary combat use into, in the right environment, an improvised trap detection and trap clearing tool. It is the kind of layered functionality that feels entirely unintentional, a side effect of a physical simulation behaving more consistently than the designers probably expected. The Breton magical heritage. Bretons are the most magically attuned of Skyrim's playable races, and the reason for that has nothing to do with simple talent. Bretons carry elven blood, specifically the blood of the Aldmer, the ancient elves who first settled the continent of Tamriel. Thousands of years of intermarriage between Atmorans and Aldmer in the region of High Rock produced the Breton people, who inherited both the physical robustness of their human ancestry and the magical aptitude of their elven lineage. In practical terms, this expresses itself through Conjure Familiar as a starting spell, a native 25% magic resistance that requires no investment to maintain, and the Dragonskin Racial Power, which provides 50% spell absorption for 60 seconds once per day. That Dragonskin power, when stacked with the Atronach Standing Stone and the Atronach Alteration perk, pushes total spell absorption to 100% for its duration. For those 60 seconds, a Breton mage using Dragonskin becomes functionally immune to all hostile magic. Every fireball absorbed and converted to magicka, every frostbolt negated before it lands. No other race achieves this threshold in vanilla Skyrim without the Necromage vampire interaction. The irony is that Bretons are often treated as a mild, unremarkable choice compared to the dramatic racial powers of Nords, Orcs, or Khajiit. Their heritage runs deeper than any of those, and the magic woven into their bloodline is older than the kingdoms that currently define them. The Midden's dark secrets, beneath the College of Winterhold, accessible through a hatch in the main courtyard or a trapdoor inside the Hall of Countenance, lies the Midden, a cold, waterlogged dungeon full of dead students, old experiments, and at least one entity that should not exist. The Midden Dark, a lower section of the space, contains the Atronach Forge, a powerful ritual apparatus capable of creating Daedric equipment, summoning Atronachs, and producing enchanted items through a combination of soul gems, specific ingredients, and a sigil stone. The forge is detailed in a journal found nearby from an anonymous student who discovered its secrets and used it to summon something deliberately unbound. But the most quietly unsettling element of the Midden is the hand. A severed, gauntleted hand trapped inside a magical cage, accompanied by the journal of a mage named Ranmir who conducted an experiment involving 4 of his colleagues. Each person placed their hand on a different ring. The rings activated. Ranmir's colleagues were consumed. His hand remained. The journal ends there. No quest involves the hand. No NPC references it. The college, which sits above this room and runs classes on magical theory every day, apparently knows the Midden Dark exists and has chosen to continue its business without comment. The midden rewards exploration precisely because the college doesn't want you asking what happened down there. The ward that dragon breath cannot break. Dragons are the dominant magical threat in Skyrim, and their breath weapons, streams of fire or frost powerful, enough to kill a poorly equipped player in seconds, are treated by many as the hardest attacks in the game to weather. Wards, it turns out, counter dragon breath in a way that is almost completely unintuitive. The game processes a dragon's breath attack not as a single sustained blast, but as a rapid series of small individual hits, essentially the same system as the Flames and Frostbite novice spells, but larger, because ward power regenerates continuously, even when struck. The self-repairing nature of the ward means that the regeneration rate can actually keep pace with the incoming damage of low and mid-tier dragons. A lesser ward, the cheapest and most accessible ward spell, can, under the right conditions, completely nullify an ancient dragon's breath attack for as long as you have the magicka to sustain it. The Steadfast Ward and Greater Ward make this even more reliable. There is something striking about the dynamic this creates. A novice tier restoration spell, upgraded through perks and sustained concentration, becomes one of the most effective counters to the most dangerous creatures in the game. Most players who avoid restoration never find this out, because they assume wards are for blocking fireballs, not for standing in a dragon's breath and refusing to move. Illusion's invisible ceiling on enemies. Illusion spells in Skyrim have a soft limitation built into them that is easy to overlook because the game never announces it. Every illusion effect, calm, fear, frenzy, pacify, courage, has a level cap beyond which it will not work, and that cap is tied to the enemy's base level rather than any visible indicator. A calm spell at base level will not affect an enemy of more than 8. Upgraded versions push that ceiling progressively higher. The Kindred Mage perk raises the cap for human and mere targets. The Animage perk extends effect to creatures. Master Illusion perks push the ceiling further still. But the crucial detail is that even a fully illusion-specialized Dragonborn encounters things the school cannot reach. High-level Draugr, powerful Falmer, and certain named enemies have base levels that exceed the cap of even the most upgraded illusion spells, and the game provides no feedback when this happens. The spell simply fails, apparently normally, without indicating that the target was out of range rather than immune. This gap between expectation and reality has frustrated countless players who assumed their illusion build was broken, or that certain enemy types resisted the school. The school doesn't resist. The enemies are simply too powerful for the available spells, and the game leaves you to discover that distinction entirely on your own. The Spellbreaker's dual nature, the Daedric artifact. Spellbreaker is, on its surface, a shield, a heavy shield bearing the enchantment of a ward that activates while blocking. Raise Spellbreaker and a magical barrier appears, protecting against spells up to 50 points. What is less obvious is that Spellbreaker's ward functions identically to a cast ward spell in almost every mechanical respect. It benefits from the Ward Absorb perk, restoring magicka when struck. It can hold off dragon breath by the same rapid hit logic that applies to all wards. It blocks spider poison and chorus venom. It prevents the disarm shout, and because Spellbreaker generates its ward at no magicka cost, the ward exists as an enchantment rather than a spell. A warrior who has taken Ward Absorb can use Spellbreaker to fill their magicka pool mid-combat simply by holding their shield up while enemies cast at them. This creates a peculiar hybrid character, a sword and board fighter who raises their shield not for the armor value, but to convert enemy spells into magicka reserves they technically have no intention of spending. Spellbreaker is obtained by completing the Daedric quest for Periite, the Daedric Prince of Pestilence, a fact that adds a quiet irony to the idea of a shield that absorbs the essence of attacks rather than simply deflecting them. The two races born of magic. Skyrim presents 8 playable races, each with a distinct magical tradition, but 2 of them stand apart because their very existence is the result of magical events so significant that they reshape the population of Tamriel. The Dunmer, the Dark Elves, became who they are because of a divine curse. The Chimera were a group of Aldmeri dissidents who followed the living god Veloth to Morrowind and eventually made pacts with the Daedra, primarily the Tribunal of Almalexia, Sotha Sil, and Vivec. When the Chimera were transformed into the Dunmer, their golden skin turned ashen, their eyes turned red. It was the direct result of the Tribunal's actions and Azura's response to them. The Altmer, by contrast, are the closest living descendants of the original Altmer, having changed the least through history. Their extreme magical aptitude is not a talent developed over generations. It is the inherited capability of a people who were, in their original form, native to a place called the Somerset Isles, and shaped by magical practice so thorough it became biological. When you cast spells as an Altmer in Skyrim, you are drawing on an unbroken chain of magical inheritance stretching back to the earliest recorded era of Tamrielic history. The 50 extra magicka Altmer start with is not a game mechanic, it is ancestry. The Eye of Magnus and what was left behind. At the climax of the College of Winterhold questline, you confront a massive pulsing orb of unfathomable power that has been pulled out of the excavation site at Sarthal and brought to the college. The Eye of Magnus, named for the god of magic who departed Nirn at the end of the Dawn era, is a remnant artifact from a time so ancient that no one in the game fully understands what it is. Magnus was one of the beings who helped shape the mortal world during the Merethic era, and his departure from Nirn tore open what became the sun, a wound in the sky through which magic continues to flow into the mortal realm. The Eye is theorized to be something he left behind, a concentration of his essence, or a tool from the act of creation itself. What makes the Eye relevant beyond the questline is that its power is explicitly beyond anything mortal hands should be able to control. Unkano, the Thalmor agent who attempts to harness it, is not simply a villain acting on ambition. He is a mortal attempting to absorb the creative force of a god, and his failure is not a surprise, but an inevitability. The Staff of Magnus is required to seal the Eye because it is one of the few artifacts in existence explicitly connected to Magnus's own power. It is a key for a door that was never supposed to be opened, and sealing it does not destroy the Eye. It simply contains it again, resting beneath the college, presumably forever. The Respite perk and the Hidden Stamina Restore. There is a perk in the restoration tree called Respite that receives almost no attention in discussions about mage builds or combat efficiency, because its function sounds narrow on paper. Respite causes healing spells to also restore stamina in addition to health. Each point of healing applied carries a proportional stamina restoration. In practice, this transforms the act of healing mid-combat into a dual recovery action that addresses two of the game's most important resources simultaneously. Warriors who dip into restoration for respite can heal stamina-intensive power attack builds without ever stopping to rest. Battle mages who are constantly switching between spell casting and weapon swings can sustain their stamina pool through healing alone. The regeneration perk, which increases the magnitude of all healing spells by 50%, stacks with respite, meaning the stamina restoration grows alongside the healing bonus. What looks like a modest utility perk becomes, with the right investment, a combat sustain mechanism that effectively eliminates one of the game's core resource pressures. Respite is one of those perks that rewards players who read carefully and think laterally. The kind of quietly powerful choice that does not announce itself because it quietly handles problems before they become problems. Become ethereal and the mage's secret window. There is a shout that most warrior-type players treat as a survival tool, and most mage players overlook entirely. And in doing so, they miss one of the most elegant magical interactions in the game. Become Ethereal transforms the Dragonborn into an untouchable spectral form for 8, 13, or 18 seconds, depending on how many words of the shout are active. During that window, you cannot deal damage or receive it. What the shout description does not highlight clearly is that magicka, health, and stamina continue to regenerate at full speed throughout the entire duration. For a mage facing a powerful enemy with a depleted magicka pool, Become Ethereal is effectively a free full recharge that no enemy can interrupt. You step out of the fight, recover completely, and step back in. It also functions as the ideal setup window for master-level spells, which take 3 full seconds to cast while you stand motionless and completely exposed. Become ethereal before casting, and those 3 seconds of vulnerability disappear. The spell charges, the shout expires, and you emerge from the casting already armed with something your enemy has no time to interrupt. Paarthurnax can teach you to meditate on the first word, Faim, granting an additional 25% health regeneration while the shout is active. The dragons invented the Thu'um as a weapon. One of its words, repurposed, has become a mage's refuge. The Black Soul Gem and what it actually holds. Soul gems in Skyrim come in a hierarchy from petty to grand, and the Cheshati soul of any creature falls somewhere along that range based on the creature's level. A fox yields a petty soul. A mammoth yields a grand soul. The system is logical and navigable, but there is a category of soul that sits entirely outside this hierarchy, the Black Soul. And understanding what it represents changes how you experience the world you move through. Every humanoid in Skyrim carries a Black Soul. Every bandit, every guard, every merchant, every named NPC and nameless villager. Black Souls are equivalent in power to Grand Souls, but can only be captured in Black Soul gems or the reusable artifact Azura's Star, remade as the Black Star. The lore implication is profound and deeply uncomfortable. Human souls are not simply more powerful in a mechanical sense. They are a different category of thing, requiring a vessel specifically designed for them, one that the game associates directly with Daedric practice and the most morally taboo form of magic, Collecting and using Black Soul gems is considered dark art in Skyrim's world. The College of Winterhold does not stock them. Standard merchants do not sell them. The fact that they are obtainable and usable without any in-game consequence is itself a quiet statement about what the game allows and what it silently permits you to become. The fine meditation and Parthenax's gift. When the Dragonborn climbs to the summit of the throat of the world and speaks with Parthenax, the ancient dragon who has spent centuries meditating on the nature of the Thu'um, they are given an opportunity that almost no other character in the lore has ever received. Parthenax offers to help you meditate on one of three words of power: Fus, Faim, or Yol. Each meditation grants a passive ability that enhances a specific shout. Meditating on Faim, the first word of Become Ethereal, unlocks a passive called Eternal Spirit, which increases health regeneration by 25% while the shout is active. This stacks with all other regeneration bonuses and applies for the full duration of the ethereal state, meaning a build that combines Become Ethereal with high restoration investment can emerge from the shout with more health than it entered with. The meditation on Yol, the first word of Fire Breath, grants a passive called the Fire Within, which increases the shout's damage by 25%. Meditating on Fus, the first word of Unrelenting Force, grants force without effort, reducing the chance you are staggered by enemy attacks by 25% and increasing your own stagger on enemies by the same amount. These bonuses are permanent, carry through for the rest of the playthrough, and are easily missed. The game offers the meditation dialogue once and moves on. Parthenax is the only source. He gives freely what dragons have hoarded for centuries: Azura's Star and the soul it cannot hold. Azura's Star is among the most coveted magical artifacts in Skyrim. A reusable Grand Soul gem that does not shatter after use, allowing the same gem to be filled and emptied indefinitely. Obtained by completing the Daedric quest for Azura, the shrine of whom sits in the mountains east of Winterhold. The star functions exactly as a Grand Soul gem in every respect except permanence. In a system where soul gems are consumed on use, the star represents an enormous economy of both resources and inventory space. But the star has a limitation built into its nature that most players discover by accident and find quietly disturbing. It cannot hold humanoid souls. Black souls, the souls of men, mer, and beastfolk, require Black Soul gems. Azura's Star, in its original form, refuses them. If you choose to give the broken star to Nelica instead of to Azura's shrine, he remakes it as the Black Star, a version that accepts humanoid souls only. The choice between them is framed as a moral one. Serve a Daedric prince and receive her intended gift, or accept a corrupted version that specifically exploits the category of souls Azura's Star was designed to exclude. Azura's Star, at its heart, is a tool that draws a line. The Black Star is what happens when you erase it. Soul Trap and the silent hierarchy of creatures. The Soul Trap spell, at first glance, is a practical conjuration utility. Cast it on an enemy, kill them before the effect expires, and their soul fills a gem in your inventory. What most players never fully examine is the invisible classification system the game applies to every living thing in Skyrim, a hierarchy of spiritual weight that determines which vessel can receive which soul. Foxes, rabbits, and skeevers rest at the bottom with petty souls. Wolves, skeletons, and low-level Draugr carry lesser. Giants and trolls hold grand souls, the strongest available from creatures. Mammoths also yield grand souls, making them the most efficient non-humanoid source for high-quality enchanting material. What is quietly fascinating is that the game's soul hierarchy is not merely a game mechanic. It mirrors a philosophical stance the Elder Scrolls lore has maintained for centuries. The separation between creature souls and humanoid souls reflects the theological argument that men, mer, and beast folk are spiritually distinct from the animal world, that the aedric essence in a mortal is fundamentally different from the animating force in a wolf or a bear. Capturing a grand soul from a mammoth and a grand soul from a bandit uses the same mechanical slot, but requires entirely different vessels, because in the logic of this world, they are not the same kind of thing at all.